Welcome to it. We missed last week, just wasn't a whole lot to speak about, and but we're ready to talk about things this week and get some takeaways from training camp. Are you hearing anything significant other than the big signing or the big restructuring, I guess we should say, of Xavier Howard's contract?
Well, I guess the only big news that I really heard today was that Liam Eckenberg was starting at guard, and so they moved him from tackle to guard. But then I heard, from what I understood, is he played very poorly. So they demoted him in the middle of practice today. They demoted him during practice. So I'm not sure if Solomon Kinley is going to be the starting left guard, or they're going to try Liam Eckenberg and move him down from tackle to guard.
Well, and that's something we're sitting here and I'm looking at the depth chart. I believe this came out yesterday on ESPN, the one that we're looking at. And they had Eichenberg down as the second string right tackle, with Austin Jackson at left tackle, the starters. Austin Jackson, left tackle, Solomon Kinley, left guard, Sakura playing center with Robert Hunt and Jesse Davis on the right side of the line. So you're saying this happened today, that they yanked him and demoted him. It seems like maybe there was some rumblings that this was going to happen, or at least somebody at ESPN picked that up yesterday.
Yeah, I think they were going to try to get Eckenberg more time and move him into guard to get him some playing time. But it sounds like he just couldn't handle the guard spot. He's more of a tackle.
And that's interesting, because usually it's a little bit easier of a move, isn't it, from a tackle position into the interior line at guard? Or is it, I mean, I know it's two totally different positions, but isn't it easier to transition from tackle to guard?
Typically it is, but in my experience, if finding a good left guard is almost as hard as finding a good left tackle.
Well, and that's true. And I think, in our case, though, with Tua, we need that right tackle and that right guard to be better, because that's Tua's blind spot.
Exactly.
So over on the right side, we got Robert Hunt at guard, and we've got Jesse Davis at right tackle.
Well, again, they're trying to find their best five, and I guess at least for a minute, they thought it might be Eckenberg. But after today's practice, I mean, they benched in the middle of practice.
Wow. Well, and that could be a statement, though, from the coaches to say, hey, look, get your head out of your butt.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm thinking it is, more or less. They're going to see if we get into him just a little bit, is that going to be something that motivates him? Maybe this is a guy like you. Maybe you can't compliment him, because you said that if you got complimented, you'd screw up the next play.
Pretty much. I always like to fly under the radar. Don't say anything to me.
There's a lot of us that like to fly under the radar. There was a line from Stripes that said, "I'm pacing myself, Sergeant." I want to talk real quick. We've got a game coming up. It's our first preseason game against the Bears in Chicago. And I know that this depth chart, whether it's accurate or not from ESPN, I don't know, because there's, we're talking about Mike Gesicki. He's supposedly out according to this depth chart, but he's still listed as the starter. So obviously I don't think he's going to be starting against Chicago unless something has changed. So we're looking at Durham Smith. Hunter Long was questionable. What's the take on Hunter Long at this point from an injury standpoint? He's going to miss, did they say how many games, or they don't know?
They have no idea currently how many games he's going to miss. They do expect him not to miss the season. So, and no surgery is required. So it could be anywhere from, it sounds like, it could be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so cut it in the middle. Hopefully, best case scenario, he misses 6 weeks, so he's ready to go by week 4 of the regular season?
Yeah.
That would be nice. Now, from a standpoint of coming out of COVID protocol from last year, the 2020 season was very interesting. It's a season unlike any other. We're going to see a little bit more of that this year. But do you think, with us only having 3 preseason games, it obviously changes the way you coach the team and how long your supposed starters are going to play and how long your second teamers are going to play and so forth. So for guys like Tua, I've been saying if I'm Coach Flores, I want to see him at least the first half.
I think he has to play at least the first half, and I would probably make him go into the third quarter as well in the first preseason game.
And then
I would expect one series in the third quarter.
Okay. And then by the time you get to game 2, more of a regular, maybe play him one quarter, maybe a half, because this is my thinking. I would play him another half in the second preseason game just because, in my opinion, he's still a rookie because his actual rookie season was so much different than any other rookie season or any other rookie has ever gone through. And this is for all the rookies from last year. I would consider them all to be rookies still because they really didn't get the indoctrination. They didn't get a regular training camp. They didn't get a regular off season. They finally got somewhat normalcy heading into this season, but now you've got a 3-game schedule for the preseason and everything has changed.
I completely agree with you. I think what they're going to do is they're going to have to play him at least a half in the first 2 games. I would expect him to play it probably into the third quarter in the game against the Bears. The following week, he's got to get at least another half in. And then the third preseason game is probably a quarter, and then the first series of the second quarter, and then get him out and get ready for opening day.
Okay. Now, what about the rest of the starters? Would you do the same thing with the rest of the starters or only the first-year and second-year players?
I think when you look at the roster, everything's a case-by-case basis, and you have to take their health into consideration. You're going to take their age into consideration and their performance into consideration. The one thing about the Dolphins is we're a very young franchise, so I would expect our guys to probably play more than most other teams. But again, with the 3-game preseason schedule, which has been different than every year past, they're going to have to make a decision based on the personnel and based on the player's age.
I would agree with you there. Because guys like Xavier Howard, he's probably not going to need as much time as somebody like Brandon Jones or, hey, let's talk about Noah Igbenogany. He has not really lived up to his potential. He had a couple of really good breakout games last year, but his numbers were not that good. If you looked at his overall numbers, his quarterback rating in his area, I think was it was way over 100. I remember that.
Well, they had Nick Needham starting above him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, which is different than this depth chart suggests. So, I mean, when Xavier was out, it was Byron Jones and Nick Needham, and it wasn't Noah. So,
and they got Nick Needham now in 4th string at right cornerback.
Yeah, it's not looking very good for him right now to be on this roster even.
Exactly, because you got Justin Coleman, he's up above him, and McCourty is up there above him. But I think in order for this defense to continue on its success from last year, Xavier Howard plays a very important role in that. But because of the role that Xavier Howard plays, how good he plays his position, you've got a guy over there on the right side, Byron Jones, that's going to have to live up to his contract this year.
It's time for him to step up. I thought he handled the Xavier Howard controversy right now and the contract extension very well. But he knows he needs to play better, and we expect more out of him.
Absolutely. Now, there's been a lot of talk in camp that we're looking here on this depth chart. We're looking at a base 3-4 defense. We're looking at Wilkins on the left defensive end, Raekwon Davis to be the nose tackle. Zach Seiler has stepped in, looks like as the right defensive end, and they're going to talk about putting Jalen Phillips at the will position.
That's going to be an adjustment for Jalen. He's really going to have to learn that position and come along. He's going to do a lot more in coverage now than he's had to do in the past. So again, for a young player or for a rookie, it's going to be difficult for him.
I agree with you. Do you think with him, it brings to mind for me, it makes me think that they're looking at Jalen Phillips to be somewhat like we played Jason Taylor.
Yeah, he'll be a complete hybrid. They're gonna move him around and just all it is the 30 defense with over under and will walk up. So he's going to be just going to be a hybrid defensive end that's going to give you a little bit of coverage when you need him and give you some good edge rushers as well.
Does he have that speed though? I know that they talked about he does have the speed when he came out of college, but does he have the speed like a Jason Taylor to be able to cover that position, or is this a little bit of a reach?
I don't think Jason was typically that fast. Jason got faster as he got better, as he recognized fronts and came off the ball a little bit better. So, I mean, them both coming out of college, they're very similar. Now, Jason, of course, he went through the learning curve and got great. Can we expect that out of Jalen? Who knows at this point? But at least there's that hybrid is a very tough position to play.
Absolutely. And there's not many people in the league, not many players in the league have ever played that position. I think Jason Taylor probably, in my opinion, he set the bar for that position. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Jalen Phillips. Now he's questionable. What's his injury outlook at this point?
I have not heard.
Okay. I haven't heard a whole lot on that.
Very quiet. The training room has been very quiet about all these injuries. And, I'm not quite sure how serious some of these are, or they're just dings.
Well, that's what I'm thinking too, and it's not surprising that now this training room and this coaching staff would be a little bit sealed lips because our head coach came right out of New England, and that Bill Belichick, he never really even liked having to put out an injury report, and he certainly didn't like having to report certain players that whether they're questionable, probable, or what have you.
Yes, and Troy, I know Troy Maurer very well. He was there with me when I played. Troy's a great trainer, but I don't, like you said, this staff comes basically from New England, and they're going to play the same games, and you're not going to know who's healthy and who's not. It's been very, very coy right now as far as the injuries and how serious they are.
Well, and it's the same thing that they did in the offseason. We've talked about this at length about, the Dolphins really didn't make a whole lot of moves. They don't talk about their moves, even with the entire, I want to say standoff, with Xavier Howard. I mean, it lasted all of maybe 5 days. That thing with Xavier, that didn't last that long, but they were pretty mum on that. Brian Flores was asked about it. He said that's something that's just going to remain. It's a team issue, and it'll remain in the locker room.
And that's probably the best way to handle it. You never want to get into a public feud with a player. And I think Flores learned a lot from Coach Belichick, where it's better not to talk about it, keep it in-house, and then the problem usually goes away.
Well, and I want to give some props to Xavier Howard on that as well. I thought he made a mistake. I didn't particularly like him coming down there the first day of camp, coming out afterwards and going out onto Twitter and Instagram or wherever it was that he went to and saying that he wanted to trade out of Miami because he wasn't happy. Again, that's something, keep it in the locker room, keep it amongst yourself and the coaches and the general manager. Let's get this thing done. Because the Dolphins, at least Brian Flores, when he was questioned about it, the only thing that he would say other than it was in-house, it wasn't really going to talk about it much, was that we are talking and it's positive. And I think that's where it needs to stay. And I think Xavier handled himself, other than his first outcry, a little bit of, I want to trade. I think after that, he handled himself very professionally. And I think that's why we were able to get the deal done so fast.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me to find out that Coach Flores and him had a conversation after the first day of practice to say, look, we're working on this. We're going to get you done. We know we want you here, because Coach Flores was very clear about keeping Xavier Howard here in Miami. So I think after that first practice and those tweets, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Coach Flores sat down with us and says, calm down. We're going to get this done for you.
Yep.
Let's work on this. So just, be patient and we'll get it done.
Absolutely. And obviously we did get it done. He's happy. He is here. And from what I understand, the two sides have agreed, and the Dolphins have said that after the season is over, sometime in February or March of 2022, they will sit down with Xavier Howard and his agent, and they will discuss reworking the deal completely.
That's all you really can do.
Well,
there's only so much cap room to go around.
Exactly. And I think that's another thing. I don't know if those types of conversations happen between the head coach necessarily and the players. Maybe they do. Certainly would have been a conversation that Chris Grier would have had with him. But I think if I was the head coach, I probably would have told him the same thing that we talked about is, look, Xavier, you're either down here to make a lot of money and that's it, or you want to be a part of something special and win some championships.
It's always about winning championships. I mean, that is the goal in the NFL, and if you don't get there, you're going to be replaced.
Well, that's true. And at the same time, though, you've got a lot of guys, and I'm not going to name any names, but you do have a lot of guys that you can go back through the years and you can take a look at him and go, well, he wanted his money. His money was more important to him, so he took off and went to another team for the money, and he didn't win a championship. There's a lot of guys that happens to, and you would think that would be a lesson for those guys moving forward. Hey, I'll take a little bit of less money this year because I can win a championship, and the money that I don't take in my contract, I might be able to make that up with some endorsements.
What was interesting, you saw the contract comparisons of Tom Brady to Josh Allen. Josh Allen just signed a new 6-year deal for $267 million for 6 years. And in Tom Brady's career, in 17 years, he made less money than that. He made $253 million over 17 years versus Josh Allen making more money in 6 years.
Oh, absolutely. And, I had that conversation I told you with Mark Duper, and he was sitting there saying, my God, these guys make more money in 1 year than I made my entire career. I mean, Duper played in the 80s and I think early part of the 90s, but still, that's the nature of the game. And some of these guys, they just have to understand that this is the NFL is always changing. It's always, as long as it's the most popular sport in America, there's going to be more and more money made every single year, and the salary cap is predicated on how much profit the league makes.
Of course.
Although, and this is a beef that some of the players have had, is that the salary cap went down this year. Tom Brady had that beef because the salary cap went down this year, but that's because they lost a lot of money in 2020.
Of course. I remember when I came to the NFL, the salary cap was $19 million for the entire team. Now it's what, $219 million?
Yeah, well, they expect it to be about $220 million next year, I believe, something like that. $19 million a year when you came into the league, and now we got guys making $19 million a year, just themselves.
Exactly. It's a lot different. It's a lot different. A backup quarterback was lucky to make $1 million.
Oh, exactly. I remember backup quarterbacks were somewhere slated in between $500,000 to $750,000, maybe $800,000.
Yep. I mean, the times have really changed. I mean, my rookie minimum was, I signed minimum my rookie year, I believe it was $120,000, and it was a split contract where if I got hurt, I only got 60 of it.
Wow. So nothing was guaranteed. Well, maybe 60 of it.
Yeah. Nothing was guaranteed. So players are in a good spot with the guaranteed money now. Back in the day, it was the only guaranteed you money you were going to get was signing bonus.
Right. Well, and now Xavier, talking about guaranteed money, his contract is guaranteed, I think, at 50% if he's injured in the 2021 season. Is that correct?
I believe so.
I have it here somewhere, and I'm looking. Oh, here it is. But I'm not sure it actually says. This doesn't have the breakdown. This portion here that I had for today's show was, the impact that he had with us. He only finished second in 2020 in passer rating allowed at 53. That was according to Pro Football Focus. So, yeah, he's going to be he's a game changer for us on that defense. We've got a lot of good guys on that defense, but I want to talk about some of these guys that need to step up their game a little bit, like Christian Wilkins. He's had some good games. He's been good, but I wouldn't say he's been great. Is this year going to be a make or break year for him, you think?
I believe so, but again, now you're having him play outside more than he's had to in the past. Raquan Davis has been playing great right now. We'd like to see Christian Wilkins, be the player that we thought he was going to be. So there is some pressure on him this year. So that, we're young, and then we have enough age there to kind of corral everybody. So it's going to be interesting how they all fit together.
Well, and I like the fact that they've moved him to the outside. They've moved him over to left end. I think he's going to thrive there. As you said, Davis is playing great inside on the interior of that line. And I think if you move Christian Wilkins out there to the outside, more of an edge guy, I think he's going to be able to light it up this year.
I really hope so. We love his energy. He's a great character guy. So hopefully this is the year that he breaks out.
Certainly hope so. Let's get back to, and one last thing I want to talk about on this defense. I don't know if you're aware of this. I actually had no idea, but when the Dolphins go to New England for the season opener, they are bringing a streak with them that is unmatched right now in the National Football League. And that is 22 consecutive games with a turnover generated. It dates all the way back to the 2019 season.
Well, that is the most exciting thing about Miami football right now. What Coach Flores has brought is that defense, and they have a net getting to the football and creating turnovers. It's been very exciting to watch, and I hope it continues.
I certainly do too.
We always have good luck going to New England. We play well up there, typically.
We have. Well, I think back one of the greatest games we ever played up there, and rest in peace, Coach Sperano, but when he broke out the Wildcat there in 2008.
Yeah, Coach Sperano was a great man.
He was. And we've talked about that. I told you him making sure to come over and say hello to all of us at Bow Campers out there in Plantation when we would go in there after games. And if we won, he would come over to the table and he'd be in a great mood. How'd you like that game today? But he always made sure to come over and talk to us. And that year, of course, we won an awful lot. We won. That was greatest single season turnaround in NFL history. Go from 1-15 to a 10-game turnaround to 11-5. So anyway, I thought that was extremely interesting. But one thing that's even more interesting, though, if you're going to go back and take a look at this ball hawking defense, they haven't had that success so far in camp. Tua and actually even Jacoby Brissett, they've been chewing this defense up.
Well, they've had their good days and their bad days, but again, the practices, the teams have been pretty vanilla right now. So their blitz packages aren't in yet. They probably won't really get to that till next week. So I think next week will be a little bit better tell of how far the defense has come along right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think actually by the week 3, by the second preseason game next week, I think we're going to see a lot more of those packages. I don't know. It's so different this year because I'm so used to having the final, big preseason game, basically where most of the starters play at least a half, maybe even into the third quarter is game 3. We don't have that this year because everybody would rest at game 4. And it's all the guys that are on the cusp of making that 53-man roster. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with just 3 games in the preseason.
That's very different. And it'd be hard for younger guys to even make the roster because there's just very limited snaps that are available now. If you take a whole game away or possibly 2 games, in some years we had 5 preseason games. So with 2 lesser games, it's tough for a guy down in the third string depth chart to get enough snaps to get noticed.
Well, and let me ask you this. Is COVID going to play a role in making a 53-man roster? And I don't want to talk about just the Dolphins in this. Obviously I do, but league-wide, would you be, as a coach, take it from the concept of being the player's rep and then take it from the coach's side. We have a different COVID protocol in place this year because last year we didn't have a vaccine. This year we have a vaccine, and the league has come out with their protocol for if an unvaccinated player or a group of unvaccinated players causes an outbreak amongst their team that causes a game to be postponed or actually where it has to be canceled because they can't reschedule it, that the team will forfeit. Is that going to be something that coaches are going to look at and say, okay, I've got a choice between this guy who's vaccinated and I got a choice, and the other guy is this guy who hasn't been vaccinated, so I'm going to take the vaccinated guy and put him on my 53-man roster?
Well, it's already happening now. So I watched I guess the president of the union is a player for the Bills, and he came out about the vaccination policies. And what he was saying was a lot of agents are being told if your player is not vaccinated and he won't have a chance to even come into a program. So even if there is a mid-season injury and the player isn't vaccinated, the teams are saying they don't even want to talk to him. So, and the player from Buffalo came out and was really saying, we are people as well, and we get to make our own choices. You can't make it mandatory for everybody. Some people don't want to get the vaccine, so it's a very complicated issue. But if you're a GM and you need a player to come in, well, do you take the kid that's vaccinated or you take the kid who's not vaccinated, and it could possibly spread or be sick? So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult to juggle those personnel moves inside for the GM.
I agree with you, and I think even from a coaching standpoint, I mean, coaches, they want to win games, they want to get to the playoffs, they want to win a championship, obviously. So I don't think the accolades of hey, in my career as a coach, I had a .633 win percentage. Yeah, that's something that they probably think about later, but I think right now as a coach, you're thinking about the best way forward for your team to compete and win games and get to the playoffs and get a high seeding in the playoffs. So I think as a coach, you've got to be looking at that also. I got this guy here, he's vaccinated. This guy's not vaccinated. This is the guy that's going to be on the team, because I'm not going to take a chance that the unvaccinated player causes an infection on my team and we have to forfeit a game.
Everything being equal, the vaccinated player is going to get fined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And right or wrong, I mean, it's not like it's a policy from the NFL saying, hey, you have to get vaccinated. They're just saying, okay, if you don't get vaccinated and you cause a problem, then your team could suffer a forfeit and a loss.
Well, I was just thinking about this. This could be a serious issue for the NFL and the Players Association. Because when you start demanding people are vaccinated, or if they're going for a job, the HIPAA laws don't allow you to ask people about their medical history. Exactly. So asking a player if he's vaccinated or not could violate HIPAA rules. And you might see the union push back on this.
That's an interesting point. And I've heard some rumblings of that. And I'm trying to remember who I listened to the vice president of the Players Union. He was talking about that. And he said he didn't think that was going to be an issue. But now that you bring it up, I remember I'm thinking to myself when I was listening to NFL radio on XM, on Sirius XM, I'm thinking, wait a minute, because according to HIPAA law, you don't have to disclose anything about your medical history, your what's going on with you medically right now. That's all between you and your doctor. It's as sacred as a priest in a confessional. So I had a feeling you're right. I got a feeling that the Players Union may actually end up pushing back on that a little bit.
Well, see, a good player gets released for some reason, and the only reason he doesn't get picked up is because he wasn't vaccinated. He's got a case.
He's got a case.
Whatever it is, for that medical information being revealed.
Well, not only does he have a case, but then that makes a case for a class action suit. And so the NFL's got to tread this one a little lighter than I think that they are. I think they may need to rethink that policy of, I know why they did it. They wanted to do it because they figured the vaccinated players would police the unvaccinated players. But again, my body, my right, my body, my choice. And a lot of the players are choosing that because they either don't trust the vaccine, they don't trust vaccines at all, or they just, for whatever reason, it's their choice. And I think that's a big issue for the National Football League moving forward. I think it's something they need to revisit.
I'm in complete agreement with you, because that could be a can of worms the NFL is about to open up, making vaccines having a discriminatory policy versus people who are unvaccinated.
Well, it's already happening, and I'm not trying to I don't want to put the show over into a political realm, but that's already happening, and I think we're going to see this play out in the courts in some cities where you have some mayors that are saying if you're not vaccinated, you're not going to be able to eat in restaurants, or you're not going to be able to go into nightclubs, you're not going to be able to go into a gym. This is definitely something that's going to be tested in the courts, and people are going to pull back and rely on the HIPAA laws. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, not just in the National Football League, but I think in every sport.
It's the way it's going to go this year, and it's a very political time right now.
Absolutely. And I'm going to move on from this. I had a correction that I wanted to make from our show when I was down in Fort Lauderdale 2 weeks ago. We were talking about the quarterback with the situation with the Colts. And it was Carson Wentz that went down. Because we were talking about the Colts and we were talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and we were talking about who it was that went from the Eagles and so on and so forth. And somehow we came up with Nick Foles. It was the only thing we could think of that went to the Colts. And it was actually Wentz. Yeah, Carson Wentz went to the Colts and Nick Foles is in Chicago. Although I think he's probably got a little bit of a trade clause or something, some sort of permission from the Bears to possibly look for a trading partner that they could have, or look for another team with Justin Fields being there. Do you think that that's something that's going to happen, or are we going to find out Saturday night how much of a starter position is locked in for Foles or not?
I think it's too early to determine that. I think we just have to wait and see, because we don't know how good Justin Fields really is. We don't know how he's going to play. If that's the case, they're going to go with Nick Foles, and if he is the guy, then they may want to move off him and see what they can get as trade value.
Absolutely. And they've got till the trade deadline to figure that out if Justin Fields ends up, taking over that position. But the Bears, they keep saying, nope, Foles is our starter and Justin Fields will wait till next year, it sounds like. But, anything can change, especially in the National Football League, which Jerry Glanville so well coined, not for long.
And you always have injuries. We're going to lose a couple good players early, in the season that are going to need to be replaced. And that's where that trade deadline is going to come in, saying, okay, our younger guy's the guy we want, so we're going to move off our veterans.
Absolutely. Now, I want to come back to one thing that we didn't touch on, and that's been, we've talked about this, and we both think it's a weak spot in our roster, and that's our running backs. Myles Gaskin, obviously, he is locked in right now, I would say, as the starter, and it probably, unless there's an injury, I would say he's definitely going to be slotted as the starter for opening day. This was interesting, I thought. You've got Malcolm Brown. He is actually second team right now. Ahmed, because of an injury, has been knocked to third, and then Jared Doakes coming in at fourth. Now, do you think will the Dolphins carry 4 running backs, or do you think one of those guys is going to be outside looking in?
I don't think they're going to carry 4. I would say they're going to carry 3, and it's going to be running back by committee.
That's what I'm thinking. We've kind of done that for the last several seasons anyway, and I really thought that, Ahmed had his time to shine, and then, of course, he had a little nagging injury. And Gaskin, he was playing good, and he's had injuries. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think I agree with you. I think they're going to rotate 3. And if Ahmed doesn't come back from whatever little lingering injury this is that he has, he might be that guy that's sitting on the outside looking in.
Well, I have a lot of high hopes for him.
I do too.
Ahmed's got a lot of upside.
He's the type of back that gives a lot of energy. I mean, he can bust one open at any moment, I think.
Yeah, he's got a second gear.
Absolutely.
Myles Gaskin to me is the guy that probably should be the starter. He's played well. Then, Brown has done it. He's been pretty good in camp. And Ahmed has really shown some things last season that really puts him up there. So I think they're probably going to carry 6 wide receivers, maybe 7, and only go down to 3 running backs.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because I was looking at this, and there's a couple of those receivers now that you've brought it up. I mean, we know that Jalen Waddle's going to start. We know that Will Fuller, after the suspension, he'll be starting, and then we're looking at Devontae Parker in a 3-wide receiver set. Preston Williams in my opinion, Preston Williams is the wild card here because he's out right now. He's got it's a foot injury. He got, unfortunately, we tore the ACL, the MCL, or both. I can't remember, in his first season, rookie. Last year he gets hurt again. He's hurt now. I've said it and I'll say it again. You're only as good as your ability to stay on the field. How long is it going to be with all of the upside that Preston Williams has? How long is it going to be before this coaching staff says you can't be on the field, so we're going to move on?
He has at least another year.
So you think he makes the roster this year?
Excuse me?
So you think he makes the roster?
He will be on the roster this year. I don't see Isaiah Ford making it.
No, I don't either.
And Albert Wilson is in a tough spot.
He's in a tough spot because Lynn Bowden Jr. has got a lot of upside, and of course he's younger. And Wilson, he may not have helped his stock by sitting out in the protocol last year for COVID.
No, I mean, coaches don't like that. Coaches want you there no matter what.
And the other guy that's actually this is another player that could step up and make some noise is Mac Hollins.
I don't know much about him.
Well, we saw a few glimpses of him earlier, and he could be a force. I doubt it. Probably maybe a practice squad spot for him. Robert Foster, he's a long shot. So I would say it comes down. Isaiah Ford, obviously, he's going to be, I think he'll probably be relegated back to the practice squad. And I think it comes down to Preston Williams. If you think that he's going to get one more year, I would agree. I would give him one more year. But if he's hurt and he misses a lot of significant time this year, I may want to cut him and move on prior to the end of the season.
Well, again, also you have the trade deadline as well. So maybe if he's on the field for us, maybe we decide to move off him and see if we can get a pick out of it.
Well, that's a possibility. But if you're a general manager for another team, I mean, obviously you're looking at his injury history and his inability to stay on the field.
So it's all going to depend on his health.
Yep.
You know, if he's just tweaked up and down, I think he still has trade value. If he's flat out hurt, then the Dolphins have to move off him. But right now, he's so talented. He has so much upside. I just hope that he puts it all together and we get a really good player out of him.
Absolutely. I'd like to see him stay healthy, get healthy, stay healthy, and so we can really see what this kid's got. Because 2 years ago, in Flores' first year, I mean, he was our offensive highlight.
And Devontae Parker has injury problems as well.
He's had injury problems except for what was two seasons ago.
Yes, he's been banged up constantly. And again, he's about to be up. His deal's about to be up.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I'm probably going to keep 7 wide receivers. And I think Isaiah Ford and Albert Wilson are going to be the 2 that are left out.
That could possibly be. I'm actually. I would stick. Well, yeah. I think you're right. I think Albert Wilson. He's on that bubble. He's on that bubble for sure. Unless something happens and Preston Williams doesn't even get into the preseason games.
I mean, you can already tell they're not getting rid of Jakeem Grant.
I know.
So Jakeem Grant's going to get one of those roster spots. So
yep.
They already have on the kick returner and the punt returner.
Yeah, they've already kept him in that role, and that's a little surprising to me. But then again, we didn't draft Jalen Waddle to stand back there and return kicks.
No, we didn't, but he might be a great fit for it. I mean, we used to have O.J. McDuffie return kicks. That's
true, and it's not like drafted. Well, I shouldn't say anything bad about Ted Ginn Jr. Ted Ginn, he just wasn't exactly the receiver that we maybe Cam Cameron thought he was going to be a much better receiver. But he basically, for us, was more of a return man, and we drafted him with the 8th pick, I believe, or the 9th pick?
9th pick, and everybody wanted to take the quarterback from Notre Dame.
Yeah, Brady Quinn. I did too, but I don't know. Brady Quinn, you never know. A different place. Brady Quinn might have had a better NFL career had he come to us. And it's the same argument. A lot of people have said, well, at the Dolphins, when Nick Saban was the head coach, if we had pulled the trigger on Drew Brees, who wanted to come to Miami, had we pulled the trigger on Drew Brees, we would have won a championship with Drew Brees and everything would have been fine. Well, we don't know that for sure.
Yeah, we passed on Drew Brees twice.
I know.
We passed on the draft, and I forget who we took. We took Jamar Fletcher, I believe, out of Wisconsin, which I was really a big fan of Brees because he played for one of my coaches at Purdue. So I wanted Brees twice, and just somehow we messed it up.
Well, Nick Saban has come out, and of course, this is any excuse at all to try and soften, what he did in Miami. He's trying to say now that it was Drew Brees was the reason that he didn't stay in Miami because the doctors wouldn't sign off on Brees's shoulder, and they signed off on Culpepper's knee. I call BS on that.
I don't know. I don't particularly care for Nick Saban, but he doesn't come across to me as a person that tells tales. So it might have had a lot to do with it.
Well, it could have, but I would argue as the head coach of the football team, wouldn't you be able to go in and tell the doctors, say, look, because I don't think they failed Brees on the physical. They just said that we trust Dante Culpepper's knee more than we trust the shoulder of Brees, and this is the guy that's going to be throwing the football. I think that's what the doctor said, but couldn't Nick Saban have vetoed them and said, no, we're going to sign Drew Brees anyway?
I'm not quite sure. I don't think Nick Saban had that much power when he was here to be able to do that. I mean, usually that's a pro personnel decision at that time. And I'm not sure what the hierarchy was then. I can't remember, but it could have been that it came from the pro personnel, and the GM went with the pro personnel decision that the injury was too significant, and we were better off going with Culpepper.
Well, I think when you take a look at the overall work, even heading into that decision, the work that Drew Brees had done in San Diego versus basically one really flash in the pan season that Culpepper had the year before his injury in Minnesota. But you look at the receivers that he had in Minnesota as well. I think the overall work, Drew Brees was the much better choice of the two, but we could debate that all day long. I just thought it was kind of interesting that that's surfacing again recently, that Nick Saban has come out and said that the reason that he wanted out of Miami and the reason that he's not there or wasn't there after that was because of the Drew Brees decision.
That might have been one of the factors. That wasn't the only one. His wife hated it here.
That's what I understand. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale.
Yep. I know that she hated it, and I've also heard that Saban, he didn't like it either because he liked the idea of going out and recruiting the players that he wanted, and he didn't like being held back with a salary cap, and he also liked the teaching aspect of college and did not like the prima donnas that he was having to coach, so to say, in the National Football League.
Well, coaching college and coaching pros is two different animals. Howard Snellenberger was the same way. He was a great coordinator in the NFL, but he wasn't a great coach in the NFL. But he liked to have the discipline and everything you had in college. And he wanted to build, 3 great college programs. So some people aren't cut out to be a pro coach. That's the discipline.
I think it's an interesting point because, you just mentioned the discipline factor in college. The discipline factor in college, it does weigh in because you're able to, you really have more of the Don Shula type disciplinarian in college football where the players really don't have much of a choice. It's either you're going to do this or you won't be on the team.
Well, I mean, Pete Carroll failed the first time as a head coach of the Jets.
Miserably.
Went back to college, and then came back to Seattle, older, more mature, and as a player's coach, it really worked for everybody.
Sure. And that's what you're seeing. I think you see that way more in the National Football League now, is it's the player's coach. The disciplinarian guys like the Don Shulas and the Chuck Knowles and the Chuck Knoxes, those guys are gone. You don't see them for the most part. You see the guys that are would suit up and go out there and play with the guys if they could, much more than just somebody that's saying, hey, it's my way or the highway and you're out of here. I remember all the times that Shula would put Brian Cox in the doghouse. It was like, well, Brian's in trouble again, but he was a great player for us.
I love Brian Cox. I hated him until I actually met him. So I had to play against him. I played for the Jets, but when I came to Miami, then we switched, and he went to the Jets, and I came down here, and I finally got to meet him, and what a great guy he is. But on the field, you just did not like him. He was a jerk to play against.
Well, you know what, though? A lot of guys that excel at their position, especially on the defensive side of the ball, or maybe even along that offensive line, you got to have that nastiness about you. I mean, I think of some of the guys that played offensive line, and one guy I think of in particular is Conrad Dobler. I mean, they said he was probably one of the dirtiest players ever, but he was in the trenches. He was like, he'd throw mud in your eyes and to do everything he could.
Yeah, and Bill Romanowski was in that same category.
Yep. Now, what was talking about that though? I've heard somebody once told me that John Lynch was somewhat of a dirty player. I'm like, John Lynch was like one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet.
No, John Lynch wasn't dirty, but John Lynch wasn't afraid to hit you.
Okay, maybe that was the difference. What about you? Never played with Jack Tatum, but what did you hear about Jack Tatum?
Well, he was mean as hell, from what I remember.
Wow. It's a violent game. It's a tough game. It's not a game for everybody. And it certainly takes a different type of personality to play football, and especially to play it at a high level like the National Football League. All right, your take on the game against Chicago on Saturday.
Well, I think it's a great opening test for us. You know, we got to see what Tua can do. We got to see what some of these wide receivers can do. But it's really come down to the offensive line. I think Chris Greer is on the hook for the offensive line this year. We've made significant draft choices to improve that offensive line. Now they got to play well. I mean, there's a lot of talk that Jackson may be a bust.
Wow.
So in Finley and Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg, they need to play well this year.
Absolutely. Those three. Well, and so does Michael Dieter. He didn't really get in there a whole lot last year. He had some problems. And we're looking at him right now, second team left guard, and he should have been the starter up there at left guard. So yeah, we got some problems along the offensive line. It's early in camp. We haven't even suited up for the first preseason game. So I have a feeling they'll get this ironed out. I mean, we've got another offensive line coach this year too. So I think that's a lot of it. I think it's the teaching aspect of it. The defenses can usually get a little bit better, a little bit more on the offensive lines early in camp, and then later on you start seeing it. But the offense as a whole has actually been pretty good in camp so far.
Well, they're putting it together, and the opening game again. Let's not, everything's not going to be perfect,
right?
But I'd like to see some spark a little bit with the offensive line coming together. Tua getting more comfortable in the pocket, making some throws down the field. He's been doing a good job at camp so far of getting the ball down the field, which is something that we didn't really try with him last year. So he's attempting more deep balls right now, and we just got to start completing some of those deep balls.
Well, and I think we're going to start to see that happen. Like you said, he's attempting it this year. He didn't feel comfortable even attempting it last year because he had to torque his body too much, and the hip just wasn't allowing him to do that. And I think we're seeing that he's way more comfortable in that. Plus, he's listened to it for a year now that he can't throw the ball deep. So I think he's got something to prove. So I think it's going to be I'm going to be interested to see what they do when they come out on offense against the Bears. The Bears have a pretty good defense. I mean, they have one guy out there that I think is going to be somebody to see how they perform against, and that's Khalil Mack.
That man's very good football player.
Yep,
he's on decline a little bit right now, but he's still a force to be reckoned with.
He absolutely is. So this is going to be an interesting test, at least for the first half, I believe, and maybe even a little bit into the third quarter. I'm not going to make a prediction on whether or not we're going to win. I just want to see I just want to see progress. I want to see that our first team unit performs well against the other team's first team unit. And if I see that, then I'll have a little bit more hope going into the second preseason game where I'm going to want to see a little bit more.
Yeah, we just start coming together a little bit. I just want to see them play well for that first half, and that probably that first series in the third quarter.
Yep.
And something to build off of. So no dumb mistakes. You may throw a pick or you may give up a sack or something like that may happen to you. But I'd like to start seeing that offense gel a little bit more.
Well, I don't mind if you throw an interception, if it's a great play by the defensive back or the defender, that's one thing. But when you give up an easy interception that could have been avoidable because you tried to throw into coverage or you just completely missed the throw, that's the stuff that I don't want to see. And that's the stuff that has always made me want to pull my hair out, which is one of the reasons why I'm wearing a hat, because I don't want people to see how much hair I've pulled out of my head over the years.
That or just making sure the quarterback and the receivers are on the same page. I'd hate to see an interception because somebody ran the wrong route. Or Tua threw the ball to the wrong spot.
Right. But if the receiver falls down, or if the defender just makes a great play, you can't knock the quarterback for that. I'm like you. I don't want to see the stupid mistakes. I don't want to see the wrong reads. And I think Tua's doing pretty good. And talking about reads and talking about this, I thought you would find this to be very funny. I don't understand this completely, but we talked about Noah, and I'm always butchering this guy's name, Noah Igbinoghene, okay? He said, and this is no joke, he said that, he's a former receiver, and he said that he has learned the Dolphins' defense in part by playing Madden. He says, I like to play defense with the Dolphins secondary a lot. I'm getting used to our defense and learning it. I'm playing in the NFL, so I shouldn't be losing in Madden. What's your take on that?
I don't really have one. I haven't played video games since I was a kid. But even when I coached my team, my son would bring his Xbox and he would set up in the hotel and play all the kids. All they weren't kids; they were pros,
right?
And he'd sit there and gamble with them on Madden all the time. So Madden's a big part of the younger culture. I don't have a lot to say about that. But Jimmy Johnson used to preach this all the time. He goes, the statistic was if you won the turnover ratio by 2, you had a 750 winning percentage. If you won the turnover ratio by 3, then your winning percentage went to a 900.
I can understand that. That's easy. If you win that turnover, we've always said, if you win the turnover battle, chances are you're going to win the game.
Exactly. But so that's what, Flores has come up with a defense that takes the ball away. So for our problem on offense is we can't turn it over and lose that statistic. We can win a lot of games just by controlling turnovers and controlling the clock.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that, that's probably one of the reasons why I was disappointed that we didn't go for a back in the draft. We've talked about that. But, hey, Myles Gaskin can get the job done. I'm looking forward to Ahmed getting healthy, so he's back in the mix. And, of course, Malcolm Brown, and then we'll see what happens with Jared Dokes. If they decide to keep 4 or if they keep 3, what's going to happen? Any other last thoughts before we close it up for this week?
Oh, what do we have? About 74 hours to kick off?
Something like that.
74 more hours, and then we can start rooting for our Dolphins again.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to football again this year. Looking forward to it being a little bit different. We still got the whole COVID mess, but hopefully we won't have as many problems and issues as we did last year. And they still got through the schedule last year, even though they had to reschedule a few games.
Well, that's also good, too, that they're playing at Chicago because we have a hurricane coming down on us right now. So we don't know where the hurricane's going to hit.
Wow. The last I knew it was a tropical storm. When did it turn into a hurricane?
Well, we're projecting it to be a hurricane. So it's still a storm right now. I'm hoping the DR tears it apart, though, with the mountains.
Well, so that usually those things skip off of us and they go up and they hit Georgia.
Well, it's very hard to hit where we are in South Florida.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is that hurricane's got to get through that little strait between the DR and Cuba to be able to hit us. If it gets caught on the DR, we miss it. it gets caught in Cuba Mountains. We miss it. So we're praying things crack west a little bit.
Well, hopefully, good luck on that, and well, good luck to our Dolphins on Saturday. It's going to be interesting to see how they look coming out for the first preseason game. I'm looking forward to it. John, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you before next Wednesday's show, but looking forward to next Wednesday's show, and we'll talk about how our Dolphins looked on Saturday night.
We'll be talking about celebrating our first win in preseason.
Absolutely, and have a great weekend. Have a good time watching the game, and I'll talk to you next week.
Well, God bless and be safe.
All right. Thanks, John. That's our show for this week, folks. Join us next week when we'll recap the Bears-Dolphins preseason game. I'm Brad Micheals, along with John Bock for Dolfan Radio. Thanks for listening to Dolfan Radio. Find us on the web at www.dolfanradio.com.